Okay, so looking at this integral, you can play around with it for a little bit. You'll notice you can't really simplify it. You can't do an easy sub because if u is equal to x squared minus 16, your differential won't work out. Integration by parts is going to be very messy. And you will recognize that here inside the radical we have x squared minus 16. So we have a difference of squares, which when you think about trig subs, that's going to be one of our three cases. Okay, we have x squared minus 16, so that's going to correspond here to case 3, x squared minus a squared, where a is the positive square root of 16, so a is going to be equal to 4, and we're going to use the trig sub x is equal to 4 multiplied by secant theta. So from there, dx is going to be 4 secant theta tan theta. That's how our sub's going to work, and then we want to take a look at this radical term, square root x squared minus 16, which if x is 4 secant theta, this is going to become square root 16 secant squared theta minus 16, and then we're going to factor out that 16. Okay, that's our a squared term, and this is largely why we did this exact substitution. If we factor out the 16, then we're always going to be left here with secant squared theta minus 1. Secant squared theta minus 1, we know this part right here, that's going to be equal to tan squared theta. And so really this radical is just going to become square root 16, which is going to be 4, and then we have the square root tan squared theta, which for us will leave us with 4 tan theta. Now, that's our radical, 4 tan theta. This is x, and this is our differential. So we're ready. We can go and plug everything back in. And we end up with here, dx we replace by 4 secant theta tan theta d theta. And our denominator, we have the radical that gets replaced by 4 tan theta. And so every time after you've completed your trig sub, now you're going to want to start simplifying it as much as possible. Here we can cancel out these 4's, we can also cancel out the tans, and really this one works out rather nicely. We end up with just the integral here of secant theta, and the antiderivative of secant theta, you have to know that's going to be ln of secant theta plus tan theta. Now we're done integrating. We have an indefinite integral, so of course we're going to put in the plus c. And we are almost done here, okay, except for a trig sub. We know now our integral, our antiderivative, we have it in terms of theta. We started off in terms of x. We want to go back from theta to x. So this is going to be sort of a second part of these questions. And the way that we do that is we always go back here to our original substitution, because that's the relationship between x and theta. And if x is equal to 4 secant theta, that means that secant theta is equal to x over 4. And if secant theta is x over 4, that means that cos theta is equal to 1 over secant. They're the reciprocal of each other. So cos theta is going to be equal to 4 over x. And now we can use that. We can set up our right triangle. If this angle is theta, cos we know is going to be the adjacent side divided by the hypotenuse. So that means this is 4, this is x, and then you can go off to the side, you can use the Pythagorean theorem to find this third side. You'll end up with the square root of x squared minus 4 squared. So we get x squared minus 16, and that you're going to always recognize that's the original difference of squares that we started with. And then the purpose of having this reference triangle is that now we know for our angle theta, all of the trig functions. We can tell sine theta, cos theta, secant theta, tan theta, and so on. We already knew secant theta right here. Secant theta was x over 4, but we needed to know what tan theta was. So one way of doing that is using this triangle, and we get that tan theta, tan is always the ratio of opposite over hypotenuse. And so for us, the opposite side is this radical, and the hypotenuse, this is not hypotenuse, this is supposed to be adjacent. Tan is opposite over adjacent, so that's this radical divided by 4. And so now we plug everything back in, and our final answer will be ln absolute value secant theta is 4 over x, plus tan theta. Tan theta is this ratio, square root x squared minus 16 divided by 4. Put in our plus c again, and that is our final answer.